May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio Podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, doing our bit to help preserve the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So today we have an unusual podcast. This is a Zoom talk that I gave, a Zoom meeting that we had with the All Beings Sangha in Washington, D.C. Their teacher is Indru Pantsberger. Indru Pantse is P-O-N-C-E with an accent over it, E with a dash and B-A-R-G-E-R. So I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. But anyway, their website is allbeingszen.org. And I really enjoyed meeting with them, and it was a Zoom talk. And so, as you will hear at the end, I asked, can I have a recording of this and use it for the podcast? And so here we are. And they're just embarking on a study program, a practice period, focusing on the Sandokai. And so the Sandokai is an important poem that was written by Sekito many centuries ago in China. And we chanted Tassajara. And so I was there when it was introduced to the chanting, and I studied it with Shunryu Suzuki and talk about that and what was the situation at Tassajara at the time and so forth, and answered some questions. I didn't pretend to understand it. It's a very deep poem, and I don't even understand shallow things. So, but anyway, I had some things to offer. I did a little study book on it, and I gave the link to it. If you go to cuke.com, what's new, there's a post on the, I guess that's the 19th, of October, where I give a link to the page on cuke.com for the Sandokai. And that page has links to various resources, as I say in the podcast. So anyway, one thing I didn't do there, I thought I would do here, is read a translation of the Sandokai. It's not real long. And I think you'll see why I say I'm not really qualified to explain it. But it's a great poem. This translation is by the Sotoshu Liturgy Conference at Green Gulch Farm in 1997 with minor revisions. And where did I get it off of? Well, I got it off of cuke.com. Anyway, it's the translation I post. I don't know if it's the best one. In my Sandokai study, I used translations that were available at the time, which was 1970. Just to comment on the title, Sandokai. San means three. It's it stands for many or diversity, and do means sameness. So it means oneness or sameness, And then kai, I just read kai means shake hands. It's the meeting of or the meeting of one and many, the meaning of difference and sameness. Just one thing I remember, the way it starts is Chikudo Dai Sin. Chikudo is India, and Chiku is bamboo, and Do is earth or land, therefore country. So the bamboo country. But when they name countries like that, and this is an old name, I don't know what they say these days. That the word Chiku bamboo is probably used for sound more than meaning. But anyway, Chikudo Daisen no Shin. Daisen was the great hermit, and no Shin, the mind of the great hermit. Anyway, I enjoyed studying it, and I just remember those things. I won't go further on that. So they use for the title, The Harmony of Difference and Equality. It's hard for me not to be a little suspicious of a translation made by a committee, but I don't know, it reads good. Here we go. The mind of the great sage of India is intimately transmitted from west to east. While human faculties are sharp or dull, the way has no northern or southern ancestors. The spiritual source shines clear in the light. The branching streams flow on in the dark. Grasping at things is surely delusion. According with sameness is still not enlightenment. All the objects of the senses interact and yet do not. Interacting brings involvement, otherwise each keeps its place. Sights vary in quality and form. Sound differs as pleasing or harsh. Refined and common speech come together in the dark. Clear and murky phrases are distinguished in the light. The four elements return to their natures. Just as a child turns to its mother, fire heats, wind moves, water wets, earth is solid, eye and sight, earth and sound, nose and smell, tongue and taste. Thus, for each and everything depending on these roots, the leaves spread forth. Trunk and branches share the essence. Revered in common, each has its speech. In the light there is darkness, but don't take it as darkness. In the dark there is light, but don't see it as light. Light and dark oppose one another like front and back foot in walking. Each of the myriad things has its merit, expressed according to function and place. Phenomena exist like box and lid joining. Principle accords like arrow points meeting. Hearing the words, understand the meaning. Don't set up standards of your own. If you don't understand the way right before you, how will you know the path as you walk? Practice is not a matter of far or near, but if you are confused, mountains and rivers block your way. I respectfully urge you who study the mystery, don't pass your days and nights in vain. So, That's the Sandokai. And you know, Shunryu Suzuki gave a set of lectures about it in that summer in 1970. And that was made into a book edited by Mel Weitzman and Michael Winger, Branching Streams Flow in the Darkness. Also, the original lectures are available on shunryusuzuki.com and various various edited versions of them as well. All right, so as soon as we've had our pause to meditate, we'll get right into this Zoom meeting that I had with All Beings Sangha. So when you hear the bell, if you have such a mind, hit pause and meditate or whatever for as long as you wish. And when you're ready to come back, hit unpause. And we'll be here to hit the bell to end the meditation or whatever. And we'll get into our Zoom meeting with All Beings Sangha.
I'd like to offer a welcome and a brief introduction to our very special guest today during our All Beings and Sangha Fall Ango on the Sandokai. David Chadwick was born in 1945, grew up in Texas, moved to California to study Zen with Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, the founder of our lineage, All Beings lineage. And he was ordained in 71, and he had been very involved with the San Francisco Zen Center, and later married, had some children. I first knew him when I would go to visit Tassajara in the summers, and he would be there with his son Clay. And so I have really happy memories of working in the kitchen with Clay and talking with David in the courtyard. He has been the author of several really amazing books, including Crooked Cucumber, the biography of Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, Thank You and Okay in American Zen Failure in Japan, and some audio books. Zen is Right Here, which many people are just crazy about. I highly recommend, if you haven't picked up more of what he's published, to do so, because it's all really wonderful. So we're really delighted that that David is here with us today, and we're going to go ahead and turn it over to him with the caveat that we are focusing on the Sandokai, and obviously Suzuki Roshi gave teachings on this before he passed. So if people would sort of be mindful of the context and pose to David questions that are practice related or related to Suzuki Roshi or the Sandokai, that would be very helpful. You can pose questions in the chat if you don't want to voice them yourself. But if you would like to voice them yourself, Sado and I will be keeping an eye on the screens. And if you just put your hands in Namaste Mudra, we'll be sure to see you and try to create space for you to pose your question to David. So that's our format, and we're going to try to finish right at 12 o'clock. This is being recorded as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started, and I'm going to turn it right to David to say whatever you'd like to say about the Sandokai and Suzuki Roshi.
Yeah. Well, can you hear me all right now? Good. One thing I just did is I put a link on Cuke.com's What's New, which is the Cuke Daily blog. If you go to Cuke.com, hit what's new, there's a link there, and that goes to the Cuke.com Sandokai page. So you might find some resources there. For instance, it goes to the Sandokai lecture chart on ShunyuSuzuki.com, which links to all the original lectures with various, the audio and also we put every version edited, non-edited verbatim that we can. I think we have all those lectures with audio. And there's the film from one of them. And that's also linked to from that page. And we have the raw version of the film on the video section of ShunyuSuzuki.com, and the version with the audio synced to it that was done under Michael Wenger's watch by it was Charlie Picorni was working with God, I can't remember his name right now. Anyway, so there's that there. Yeah, I like this subject. I'm not a good person to ask to explain the meaning of it all. It's still I find it endlessly unfathomable and profound and wonderful. But let me give you some background on it. And this background is also you can link to, you can find from that page. But in 1970, we had a guest teacher at Tassajara, Sotan Tatsugami Roshi, who had been the Ino at Eiheiji. And up to that point, we only chanted the Heart Sutra 3 times every morning for morning service. And Tatsugami came there and he introduced he gave us all sorts of form, the Rokuchiji, the 6 officers, what do you call the Ino Ryo, the shoe, the
Doan Ryo.
Doan Ryo, yeah. Sometimes it's called the Ino Ryo. The Doan Ryo, and I was one of the Doans, and Reb was one of the Doans, and he taught. He was really into teaching how to chant, and the person who really got into his chanting and was really his chanting disciple was Reb. But so he introduced the Sandokai into the service. He also introduced the echoes. To that point, we only had the universal echo, the Nagawa Mote, that short one. Suzuki Roshi lectured that summer on both the Sandokai and the echoes. I studied it with him. I had just come the prior year. I'd been running the dining room in the summer from when we opened, and in 1969 I arranged to be able to leave in the middle of the summer to go study Japanese intensively, which Suzuki Roshi was really against, but I told him I'd already paid for it and I was going. And then when he saw how much I learned, he wanted me to stay and go to Japan and all this stuff. And I continued in the fall studying it, but I said, no, I can't study more. I got to go back to Tassajara, and I want to be there with the new guest teacher. So Tatsugami came, and I started studying. What I'd been studying was everyday modern Japanese, right? I started studying all the stuff we chanted. I started with the Han, the kanji on the Han, but I studied the I don't want to look at myself. Where can I go back to everybody? Somehow it changed.
Okay, I'll remove that. Sorry.
I like looking at you guys.
Okay.
um, there we are. Oh yeah, much better. Um, so when Suzuki Roshi started uh, lecturing on the Sandokai, I went to him and I said, "Well, I want to do a study of the Sandokai." So, um, we were chanting it in Japanese, and we had their word translations. We had translations, but he showed me a book. But I had the Japanese translation, but he showed me a book where it had it in Chinese. Same kanji, but without all the connecting words that Japanese has, and it's more like English word order. Um, so I looked at it both ways, and every day before he gave a lecture uh, on this, well, not just the day, but maybe the day before. He was giving them almost every day, it seems to me. I'd go I'd go to his cabin and go over it with him pretty quickly, but we'd talk about it. And then I'd write the kanji up. He asked me to do this. I did not want to do it. I felt unqualified, and I don't have any, I can't write good kanji, I never could. I'd write the kanji, the Chinese characters, f- on a big blackboard. He wanted me to sit next to him on the altar while he gave the lectures and write the kanji, and I refused. He kept saying, "No, no, I just go don't." I said, "No, I won't do it. I absolutely will not do it." Uh, so I said, "I'll just write them all on the blackboard, and people can see them." Uh, and so that was really neat. So I had that experience of studying with him, listening to the lectures, and then I made a study book afterwards. And there's a link to that study book from that page. It is nothing, uh, it's nothing scholarly. It's just the kanji, which were done by Yoshimura Sensei. They're beautiful kanji above the Romanized Japanese, the basic English version. And then, I can't remember if I put anything from Suzuki Roshi's lectures on that part. I think I put up every available translation. But I did four of those studies. I did Fukan Zenge, Gengacho, Koan, Sandokai, and the Echoes. So I can't remember now exactly what was what. But so uh, I, uh, I, I was very pleased to hear you all were going to be studying the Sandokai. I think that's a great thing to study. Um, I'd say that there was a tension between Suzuki Roshi being our teacher and his style, the type of person he was, how modest he was, how humble, how low key, and Tatsugami, who is sort of had a more uh, mm, he was, he was a big, tough guy. It was a little more arrogant type of approach. But uh, I liked Tatsugami. We learned a lot from him. And I think it was inevitable that we had to go through that change. Now, Richard Baker had asked Tatsugami to come to America, but he was already well known to Suzuki already knew him. Uh, uh, because he'd been at Eiheiji and we'd had students at Eiheiji. Philip Wilson was very close with him at Eiheiji. He was also Brian Victoria's teacher. If you know who Brian Victoria Zenit War is. Uh, uh, Zenit War, Zenit War? Uh, oh my gosh. Has that been forgotten? Yeah, look into Brian Victoria. There's a lot on him on Cuke.com. He's the one that exposed the complicity of really all of Buddhism, actually all institutions, with the militarism of Japan and got especially the Rinzai to publicly apologize and Sotoshu to acknowledge it. And Brian he's a Soto Zen monk with transmission and lives in Kyoto and is really a phenomena. But anyway, Tatsugami had his style, and that I think the Suzuki Roshi said, well, it, he didn't try to criticize him, but once he said, well, he's teaching the art and the craft of Zen, uh, and and Reb said this, and that Suzuki taught a spirit we like more. But look, we learned a lot from Tatsugami. I mean, uh, uh, and he was really good to be with. He was, one thing he introduced that was really good was what to deal with rule, like rule breaking, say.
Yeah.
But beforehand, there was no particular thing you do. So, like a couple of students left, they might have stayed out overnight. They came back clearly breaking the rules, right? Beforehand, it would just depend on who was in charge, who decided to do what, who talked with. Tatsugami said they should do an apology ceremony. Nothing, no words spoken, no guilt tripping, no nothing. They just had to do an apology ceremony. And I don't know if you've ever seen an apology ceremony. They're very simple. Uh, just like offer incense and walk around this endo bowing in front of everybody. And there were some subsequent to that after he left. Isan did one for stealing from, I don't know, greens or something. And small amounts. Anyway, so there was a sort of tug of war between Tatsugami and Suzuki in terms of style and everything. But the Sandokai was according to Suzuki, was one of the functions of it was to there was the northern school and the southern school, and they're dissing each other, and was to give a bigger picture, a bigger umbrella that included them both. And in a sense, he was doing that with his teaching and Tatsugami's teaching. We had room for both. Although Dick Baker told me that Suzuki was mad at him and for getting Tatsugami over there. But I told him I don't agree. I think you're wrong. I don't think he was. But anyway, so that gives you some background there. It was a great summer. Suzuki Roshi was in very good health. There was a lot happening that summer. There was one thing Reb pointed out. There was the statue of Prince Shitoku that Suzuki had brought in, and that would on days off would go to a student's cabin, and then Suzuki would go there and have tea with them and some other people. That was a little thing that happened. There was the children's ordination for like a dozen kids. There was Charlotte Silver and Charles Brooks gave a workshop. Sterling Bennell lectured on ecology. The war in Vietnam was going on. That was a big deal that was happening there. Anyway, so that's a little background on the whole thing there. Now, maybe someone might have something to say or ask or to stimulate a new direction in this interchange we're having.
Thanks, David. So again, people can put a question in the chat, or if you'd like to pose a question yourself, you could just place your hands in Gasho, and we'll make the space for you to voice your question.
This is mate tea, incidentally. Paul Rosenblum bought it for me when I was in Germany recently for Richard Baker's stepping down and Nicole Baden stepping up ceremony. And we had a bunch of people from the Zen Center went. David Zimmerman, Fu, Tova, Norman and Kathy were there. Anyway, that's a little aside.
Okay, so we do have a couple things in the chat. Um, one person wanted to have just a little bit more background on Tatsugami. Would you?
Oh, okay. Well, Tatsugami had been the Ino at Eiheiji for 13 years. He was also the sumo champ. Philip Wilson, uh, who was a mighty, strong person who'd been a right guard at the Stanford line and was many people thought he should have gotten All-American, and it was said like nobody could get through him. And Tatsugami, Philip told me that Tatsugami beat him so bad in sumo wrestling that it turned his hair white. Uh, so that was pretty amazing. Uh, one thing he said is that the men should stop shaving their heads unless they're ordained, monks, priests, and so that was one change that happened then. He also said we should stop serving meat to guests. Um, we continued that summer, but that was the last summer we did, and we've been doing less and less each year. That was the last summer where we had the old kitchen, which um, was where the bag lunch room is. That sort of there, but not that big, not near that big. And we did what 4 summers, four years with that kitchen. Uh, and so Tatsugami he was close with Gene Ross, who was the first person from San Francisco Zen Center. Well, it was called Zen Center then to go to AH. In 1962, I think she went, and she did very well. She was quite well respected. She got ordained there. Suzuki considered ordained for him. He always considered her his disciple, and she was an early Shuso. Uh, and Richard Baker was the first Shuso. Philip Wilson was the second. Claude Dallenberg was the third, and then we had no Shuso uh, because Jean couldn't come, and Suzuki was pressuring her to come. And she had a sitting group right out in Carmel. And so, but she couldn't because she had obligations with her family. So we waited for her, and she was the Shuso in the fall of '69. So she was very close with Tatsugami. And, uh, and Kobun Chino also was in. I think Kobun might have come after Gene. Uh, so um, Graham Pesci, Philip Wilson, and Gene Ross were the three people from Zen Center. And Dick Baker went later. He was there. Oh, he was there like in '69 or something. He hated it. It was Suzuki came to visit. He said, "I'm getting out of here. I'm not staying here. This had nothing to do with us." And Suzuki went, "Please, please stay." Now he said, "No, I'm leaving." Uh, so,
So
but
going back to Tatsugami, with Tatsugami, was he married? Did he have a home temple?
yeah, he was married, and he had. Oh, they all have temples.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a temple. In fact, uh, uh, Richard Baker told me he met Tatsugami at his temple, and it had a swimming pool, and he went swimming there. And that's where he asked him to come to Tatsar. But he was asking because of all he'd heard, probably from Suzuki and, and knew because of Phil and Gene and Graham. Later, Coben was there. I don't know if Coben was there in '62, but he took care of people in AHG too. Anyway, that's all I know about Tatsugami. I don't know his lineage or
And then how did it
anything.
work out that he was asked to, or he was disinvited to stay? How did that work out?
How did it work out that he was
Well,
uninvited?
I mean, he was invited to come and help out at Tassajara, but then at a certain point, he
Oh, I can tell you that. That's in Crooked Cucumber too. Um, he was so he came in the spring of 70. He was there in the fall of 71, and then he was there in the spring of 71, and he was invited to come back in the spring of 72, but uh, there was Suzuki Roshi got a terrible blow when Katakiri resigned in the late spring of 72. Katagiri could not stand Tatsugami. It was everything he wanted to get away from, you know, the whole hierarchy thing and all that. He wanted to be on his own. He didn't want to be under some uh, guy like that who considered him to be an inferior. And, you know, he had to translate for him. And Tatsugami's lectures were unbearable. I mean, he'd go on forever. And if Kanagiri was translating, you know, Tatsugami would talk for 20 minutes and Kanagiri would translate for 5. Um, Yoshimura came in and started translating, and then it was really good. And Dan Welsh translated for one when neither of them could and did a really good job. I was very impressed with him. And I talked to Suzuki about let Dan translate, you know, translation should supposed to be done into your own language. You know, it's done. It's that's that's the way the translation is done best. But he wouldn't do it because he knew Dan's Japanese wasn't good enough for that. But that
okay.
their English wasn't good enough.
We have a question from Marie Olson.
Wait. I didn't really answer your thing. So we had a board meeting, and I was there in the spring of 71, in which every board member expressed to Katagiri how much we loved and respected him and wanted him to stay. And uh, then he's got all this pressure on him, and we're asking him, please, can you stay? And then Suzuki said, if you stay, you can do the fall practice period and I'll uninvite Tatsugami. And then he said, okay, I'll do that if you help me. And then he said, all right. So, you know, in a matter of minutes, we went from Katagiri is leaving and Tatsugiri is coming back. Tatsugami is coming back to now we're going to have Katagiri and Suzuki in the fall. Of course, Suzuki got too sick to do it and died. But we had Katagiri led that practice period, and he helped a little once Dick Baker came back, but there were no. He did not want to be in the Sen Center. I don't know if Suzuki understood this or not, but you know, he and Richard Baker weren't didn't have that they wouldn't be compatible if Richard was Abbott. That couldn't be. Uh, and so Tatsugami didn't come back. He was planning on. He thought it was his temple. He called himself Docho. He had a plaque. He had plaques made for everybody, right? The director was the Tsus, the assistant director was the Kants, and different things. The Eno, the John Rio. There were more. The Zenda was filled with plaques, and his was Docho. Suzuki was the Docho. That's the abbot of the temple. He should have been Seido, the guest teacher. And you know, I was into the Japanese words and stuff, and I would talk to uh, Yoshimura and Suzuki and this and that about them, and that's one thing became very clear. But anyway, so he lost his temple, and so there's that question
Thank you.
answered.
Marie Olson.
Us today.
Speak up.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me
Yeah.
better? Okay. you are part of, I think you are part of my family lore. And it occurred to me that it's an emotional thing for me. So bear with me as I cry through this. I have a question, but I want to make this statement first. Um, when I was five, or I think I was 5 years old, I was taken to Tassajara for 3 days, and it was during the guest season. There was something was happening where we had friends of the family who were there, and my parents dropped me off and then came to pick me up. They went down to Esalen for some type of gathering there, and it was my parents' first interaction with Zen. They had never encountered it before, and so my parents came back and stayed the night. I have some vague memories. I remember the baths. I remember the creek. I remember the bell. I remember the dining area. Um, and but my dad, I believe my dad, if somehow your name came up, my dad's no longer living, so I can't ask him. But I think he may have had a conversation with my father at some point during that time period about Zen. He thought it was nice, and oh, doesn't that look like a nice practice? And then came back and actually started sitting regularly in our home in Fort Worth, Texas, about 5 years later, or 6 years later, and then started to come to the practice period, the January intensive, and then was in the January intensive for years, maybe 20 years. But anyway, the lore, my family lore, as I hold it in my mind, is that you were part of that conversation with my parents or with my dad. So anyway, whether it's true, and his name is Ray Olson, I don't expect you.
I knew Ray very well, and I'm
Oh
from
my
Fort Worth.
God,
Wait,
is that
I
story
was just
correct?
thinking about Ray, and I thought, he must have had Ray and I stayed in touch. I'd see him when he
Oh,
was in
I didn't
Santa
know
Fe,
that.
and your mother too, Ray Nancy.
I did
Uh,
not know
yeah,
this. Wow.
yeah, and Ray was sitting in Fort Worth with Frank Simons, right? Frank and I are very close. Yeah, they had a little sitting thing
I
going.
knew they had
Ray
a
started the osteopathic. Wait a minute, is that the right
yeah,
term?
osteopathic. Yeah,
Osteopathic hospital in Fort Worth.
he was one of the founding.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I met him at Tassajara, and we
great.
stayed in touch. And actually, he said he started sitting because of me. And
Yeah,
I'll tell you what it
that's the
was.
memory that I have, is that his practice started, then he became ordained, and yeah. So anyway,
But what I said to him, yeah, yeah. Well, this is great. Listen, send me an email. I want to be in touch with you. What he said, and he would tell me this through the years, so I've heard it more than once, is that he said he was busy and he didn't have time to sit, and I said, well, just sit 5 minutes.
that's where that came from. Yes,
Yeah.
5 minutes.
And he said he couldn't get away from that. He couldn't make an excuse not to do it. And Ray went on to be very serious student and priest, and he was with Joan Halifax.
Yeah,
I don't know if you know it, but Joan wanted him to take over and be his successor.
I did not know this. That
Yeah,
is
he said
not
he
the
was too
story that
old.
my
He said,
dad
I'm
told
too old. You can't do that. I'd see him every time I went to Santa Fe. The last time I was in Santa Fe, God, he rode his bicycle there and we had lunch. Anyway, that's enough of that. Send me an email. We
Also,
can,
thank you so much. But I have a question that is
yeah.
so esoteric, but it doesn't drive me crazy. But I've been thinking about it for several years, and this may not be anything that you will be able to answer, but in the Sandokai, in the service, when it's part of the liturgy, the doshi goes up and offers incense and does three prostrations at the beginning of the chant. And it's different from any other, it's not written into the body of the chant, but at least not the form that I follow from Everyday Zen. which I think is from the San Francisco Zen Center. Um, do you know anything about that?
Reb would know.
Okay.
I would ask Reb. He's the only person I would think would know. And I would assume that's something that came from Tatsugami. And I would assume that's something that's traditional with that sutra that has been done, for the last 200 years or something, something like that. And, they don't really have good reasons necessarily when they do things because it's the way they were done before. But they can probably give you some reason, but I couldn't. Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
I have a friend, Dennis. You may know Dennis Marshall. He's a student
yeah,
there.
sure. I'm in touch with Dennis.
Yeah, Dennis is
God,
a
he's
good
going to be
friend.
100 before we know it.
Yeah, no, he's doing pretty well, by the way. But he said that Richard Baker knows all, like that's his shtick. That's part of his shtick. I mean, Richard Baker has a lot of areas,
Could be,
but,
could be, but
but,
uh,
but Reb also sounds like it.
uh, I think Richard might have a more creative interpretation than Reb, and Reb might have more traditional one.
Okay. Well, thank
Uh,
you. I really
yeah,
love this.
very interesting. Very interesting.
Thank you for
Uh,
settling my family.
yeah, that's great. Really good to hear.
Okay, other questions from out there? Sato-san, go ahead.
David, thank you very much for being with us today. And it really is quite a delight to be able to speak with you. Recently, I was reading the Branching Streams book, and I was struck by the arrangement of the talks and how it was character to character. And to hear you talk about how you were the one who was was designated by Suzuki Roshi to reluctantly put these up on the chalkboard is wow. I guess it puts it all into context. And my question to you is, did, to your knowledge, did Suzuki Roshi arrange his talks ahead of time this way? It seems like this was a very deliberate way to kind of walk people through a new understanding of a text that they're not aware of.
Maybe whatever methodology he had is all hidden, if he had any. I mean, he just seemed to always be winging it, but he would study before he gave lectures, but he wouldn't write lectures out or have some outline or anything. If there was anything to read, it would be what he was lecturing on, but he wouldn't get very far, like the first line, and then the whole lecture would be on that. He wasn't systematic. It was, weird sort of logical and like system and like everything explained. What his I I developed my Zazen instruction philosophy just straight from him. I'd talk to people. I'd say, they'd say, well, they wanted to come sit. I'd say, go to the Zendo and do Zazen before getting instruction. Do that one time, and see what I said. And don't worry, everybody's terrified they're going to do something wrong, right? And um, so that's one thing I would encourage. And the other thing, what very brief Zazen instructions. This is Roshi, but I mean, I just am finishing a book that's coming out next September with Monkfish called Tassajara Stories. And one thing you'll see in it is there's a lot of stories from students, how they got into Zen. There's a lot outside of Tassajara. And one thing you'll see some of these Zazen instructions, where he says, well, let's go sit. And they sit and cross your legs and says, uh, there, just sit and, mm, you know, do nothing, or just that's it. And like Tim Burkett, who really we have the Los Altos Endo and all that because of Tim's original starting a sitting group with Stanford students. Tim said, "Could you please give us instruction in zazen?" And he'd say, "Well, no, just sit, and uh, he'd said, "Well, can you give us any technique for how to stop the mind from wandering, this and that?" And he said, "Breath breathes." Uh, so really, what was he doing? He was setting up a place to practice where you really have to figure it out. And really, the lack of specific teaching was really quite uh, noticeable, and not laying everything out for people. But he'd also done a lot of study in his life, and he wanted people to study. He wanted Zen Center to have a study center. He wanted people to study things, but there wasn't anything systematic, you know. And you didn't have to. You certainly didn't have to. Uh, I can't even remember what you asked, but oh yeah, something about that. Now I'm back there. Uh, I I have no idea what he had in mind, and the fact that you've noticed some pattern. Of course, everything has patterns, and then we see some pattern, we can ascribe it to him. But no matter, we could probably find a lot of different patterns, but maybe there was some intentional stuff there. I noticed one thing I did notice in studying with him is that he knew more than I thought he knew. Like I thought of Yoshimura and Kobun as being scholars who knew a lot, but I could tell because of things he would say when we were looking at the text in Japanese or in Chinese. Actually, Chinese is easier. Uh, that things he would say, I go, oh, he's he knows a lot. I mean, it's pretty stupid of me, right? Uh, but I never was really a scholar. I just dabbled in it, comparing to other people who've gone on to do really serious work, like Teig and Dan Layton, Richard Jaffe, Carl Bielefeld. Those people are impressive. And Bill Porter, Red Pine, extremely impressive, who I've gotten to know. I'm very glad.
Here's another question, that a follow-up question, and one of the things that has always drawn me to Suzuki Roshi's writing is his accessibility. And when I say accessibility in English, because I've only encountered the text in English, um,
well, that's all there is. He spoke in English. He never spoke in Japanese.
And that's the nature of my question, right? So he had a pretty fluid command of the English language for somebody who was working between cultures. And I was wondering if you could comment on that a little bit, because it seems like both cultures were worlds away, and yet he was very easygoing in at least that's what comes through to me in the writings. And it sounds like that may have been the case in person. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really interesting. His English was limited in many ways, but his talks, like it's like when artists and musicians and people, they're sort of like channeling something, or there's you can read over and over writers, artists, musicians saying they don't know where what they did came from. I mean, I feel that way. sometimes. That didn't come from me. Uh, and the talks he gave in Los Altos are remarkably close to what came out in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And they were extremely lucid, and his use of English when like he got into the zone. Let's say he had a zone, right? When he got into the zone, his use of English could be very subtle and really really neat. He wasn't always on, but uh, you know, if go look at the verbatim lectures. Uh, if you go to that page I put up, there's a link to a chart which you can link to the transcripts for the verbatim lectures, and we have complete every verbatim lecture there is. We have. Uh, we have lots and lots and lots of light edits or minimum edits, we call them, and we're still doing more. Mainly Peter Ford and Wendy Piercing do that. And I just advise a little. And Shundo David Hayes has come in recent years and done a tremendous amount. He's extremely good at it. And I can't understand how they can understand and hear some of the stuff, and some of that audio is such poor quality. Anyway, yeah, it's his English could be remarkably good. And also, uh, one thing I pointed out in Crooked Cucumber that is that he did not his Japanese was not inspiring. It when he gave a talk, who was the guy? Tom White. No, is that his name? No, I have a good friend named Tom White, who's uh, the guy who was Uchiyama's right hand guy. Uh, anyway, he said when Suzuki visited there in 1970, he met Antaichi was Uchiyama's the abbot of Antaichi. It was still in Kyoto at that time, and when Suzuki met with them in at uh, met with the Japanese students in the afternoon and with the English students in the evening. And Tom said that they weren't impressed in the afternoon. It was just more of the same. He was probably giving him what he thought they wanted or what. But when those same Japanese students came in the evening to hear him in English, they went, "Oh, now we understand." So uh, his genius in communication was in English. It appears to me. I mean, he never had any disciples in Japan. Like he didn't cling in Japan, but he always wanted out. He knew he had this calling. He always wanted to get out from way before he should have. When he was very young.
Forgive my ignorance, but is the book even sold in Japan at this point?
Which book?
Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
it's a good selling book. It's in its fourth translation. What's his name? Fujita. Some of you must know who he is. He was head of Soto Zen's international thing. He translated it. And yeah, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind always has a publisher. The last publisher, Samga, went out of business, and they had Crooked Cucumber and Zen is Right Here. And so we don't have new publishers for those two books in Japanese, but Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind was picked up right away. Now, not always so. They published his Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind 2. They asked me when I was in Japan in 2010 with my wife. Samga brought me to Tokyo to talk to them. It was a great guy who was head of it and the number one guy. And the guy who owned it was willing to lose money publishing Buddhist books, or just barely get by. And they wanted me to do another book on Suzuki Roshi lectures. And I said, no, I can't do that. That's not my territory. I said, you've already got one. Just do not always so. So I connected them with that, and they did not always so. But I don't know if that's found another publisher. It should. But when they put out Zen My Beginner's Mind, they had a cover, a paper cover for it with a picture of Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs Bible. And that's true. It was. It's true. It was. Yeah.
So I want to offer a question that Marie placed in the chat. She asked, do you think Suzuki Roshi's experience with World War II helped form his own response to the Vietnam War that spoke particularly to those seeking a spiritual path during the late 60s?
Well,
early 70s.
He didn't. What was happening in Japan during the war was like the whole country went completely insane and was taken over by this nationalism, militarism, everything, every institution, every person had to be part of it. What happened during the Vietnam War was horrible, but it wasn't going on in America. You could totally ignore it, and there was an enormous amount of opposition. So he was aware of that, and he did participate in One Peace March, but it's not something he thought about. He just, that was our business. And he said there will always be war, and we should always do everything we can to prevent it from happening. I do not agree with him that there will always be war. That is not a necessary component of civilized society. But the way human beings are right now, that certainly will be. But anyway, yeah.
I have a question from Seru, who's in the Zendo.
Hi, David. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah.
My question is from Crooked Cucumber, and for those of you that kind of know it, it's a chapter on Temple Priest, page 83. So this is right after the death or Miss Ransom had gone away, his wife died, and the death of both his father and master. And this the book you write, at this point, he has two regrets. And so number one, I'm wondering, how did you know about these regrets? And would you care to comment on, one of them was he wished he made a stronger effort that his master had told him. And then the other mistake he saw was that his practice of stepladder Zen wasn't the way to go, kind of. And so those are what I want to ask. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, where did I get that? I got it from him. I got it from lectures or things he said. The Crooked Cucumber did not satisfy some scholars because it's total lack of sourcing. But actually, the source, just go to cuke.com. You can probably find it. But some things I just knew. But I'd say those two things are in lectures. And on shunyusuzuki.com, you can do word searches through all the lectures. And that's through the verbatim or closest to verbatim, the default versions. Stepladder Zen, but when he's talking about stepladder Zen, he might say he regretted it, but he said he regretted that he hadn't practiced. Later on when he was with us, he said he had regret that he hadn't practiced harder when he was younger. Actually, everybody, what I have noticed is everybody has all these regrets. And one reason, Suzuki Roshi would say we practice, and then he'd say why we practice, he'd say different things. One reason was we practice so we can enjoy our old age. I've certainly found that to be true. We practice so that we can have a good death, but I'd say that one reason we practice is so we have the minimum number of regrets, because everybody feels like a failure to a certain extent. This I really noticed because I interviewed people, a zillion people, and I have known teachers and had very frank conversations with them. They all feel like they didn't do good enough, and I just think everybody feels that way. And you could know the most famous actor in the world, and they still, they're not, they're still feel they haven't done a good enough job. It's so, but at the same time, he could accept all that on a deeper level, and the same as as giving up step ladders uh, and just accepting things as it is, he would say.
So we are
He,
so human, like if one thinks no step ladders in, we'll just do instant and light, that's kind of like,
right.
but that's, as far as I know, it's a story, but then what do I know?
Yeah. Well, the main point, though, in talking to us, he wanted us to realize that step by step wasn't the way, uh, but usually you find that something like that, you find that you still can't get rid of it. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It's like when Bishop Sumi gave a talk at Tassar in '67, very early, maybe even before the first practice period, and he said he was talking about the six patriarchs story which is uh, Shin Sui or whatever his name was, wrote a poem that said the mind is like a mirror on a stand, and we wipe the dust off it. And then the sixth patriarch Ning said, "Nah, there's no mirror, there's no stand, there's no dust, there's no place for the dust to alight," and he became the successor. Well, Sumi's talk, he said that wiping the dust is also a good practice. And Suzuki Roshi was frequently emphasizing there's no in different ways. There's no mirror in that. But he would also talk about wiping dust, and there's always both sides, and he really emphasized that. You can find that over and over. That's one thing you can find over and over with him, is emphasizing both sides and not being attached to one side. Remember his thing about the they call them the person who carries a board, tambankan, which means they can only see one side. And when you put the board down, you see things like, "Oh, I'm not only a human being, I'm a Buddha." And that was Buddha's realization. Oh, all beings are the Buddha. And that's both sides on everything. It's always that way. So whatever we're giving up in some way, it's still part of the picture. And that's the Sandokai, huh? Unity of one and many. But if you try to talk to him and say, "Oh, well, one, that's phenomena, and many, that's nomina," and he'd say, "No, no, no, we don't think that way," or something, What anytime you try to systematize it, it would break down, and you would fail. Or he would say, "Well, what you're saying sounds good, but it's not real." One of those things.
Thank you.
We might have time for one more brief question. Anybody? That's it, or do you have something?
Yeah, if no one else does.
Go ahead.
Hi, David Chadwick. Good to see you.
Hi there.
Thank you for being here. I wanted to tell you that I follow the Kook Instagram page.
Oh, yeah.
I totally enjoy every week seeing not only the quotes that you post with them, but also the photographs. And I was actually recently with Barbara Winger, and she told me that y'all are in correspondence a lot as far as
Oh, yeah.
photography.
Oh, yeah. But
And
do you follow her Instagram,
I
Babs?
do.
Yeah, that's really, really great artist, huh?
Yeah, and I wanted to say I also have listened to I forget if it's on YouTube or on podcast, but how you have interviewed various Zen priests.
Well, not just in praise. I
Mhm.
interviewed anybody who was around. But
Right.
go on.
Yeah, so I was just curious as far as the how you found this Dharma expression, or how you found this avenue, this passion of recording and posting through various outlets such as books and now Instagram, and how that's connected you with various people.
Whoa. What you want to include books in that? Uh, well, I was always into communicating a lot and creating things for people. And I've done a lot of music, lots and lots of music. And I have artist pages on YouTube and everything. But uh, when I went to Japan, my best friend, my close friend, Michael Katz, was a very successful agent. He was Zen Center's agent and many, many, many people's. And he said, "Hey, write a book about Japan." And I said, "No, no, I'm not. I'm in over there to learn, have input." But anyway, I started writing letters, and he said those letters, it could be a book. So that's how Thank You and Okay came about. And then I had a lot of stuff about Suzuki, so I thought, well, I'll do a book on Suzuki. That came, and then, and then I had all these vignettes. So I did. To Shine One Corner of the World became Zen is Right Here. Incidentally, there's the Zen is Right Now came out a few years ago, the sequel, like 20 years later or something, or 18 years later. And so when COVID hit, Michael said to me, uh, you should do podcasts now and do an audio book. I went, okay. Uh, so I started doing that. The Instagram, incidentally, I want to give credit here. I started putting up Suzuki Roshi lecture quotes without any photo on the What's New page, which is like the daily, cute daily posts or something. It's what, if you go to cuke.com and hit What's New, that's where it goes. The blog, right? I started, I don't know, 10 years ago, I don't know how many years ago, 12 years ago, I started putting up daily quotes, maybe 15 years ago. And about 12 years ago, or maybe longer, maybe 15 years, I don't know, a guy named Peter Ford started helping and seriously helping. I mean, like working on it on Q Archives as much as I do. And he's continued without taking a breath since then. And so it was, and the blogger, the What's New, went to Facebook automatically, to Cuke Archives Facebook, those posts. And there'd be two types. There would be a lecture comment, and there would be something else. There would be a lecture quote, and there would be something else. There were lots and lots, something else having to do with Zen. And then I had Cuke nonsense for climate change and other things that aren't important, like Zen. And and but then my wife kept saying, you should do Instagram, because she followed Instagram. Peter and I were going, wait a minute. Finally, we started doing, but he took it over then. and Peter does all those, and which is fine with me because the more other people do things, the more it frees me up. I could have come out with more books and everything if I hadn't spent so much time on Cuke Archives, but Cuke Archives is like a vast sort of encyclopedia size book in a way. But I've got Tassara Stories now. The one that's coming out next September. I made such a thing out of Tassara Stories, and it includes all sorts of stuff. It includes Green Gulch and the city and the backgrounds of people and everything. It like ended up being about 700 pages. So the one that's coming out next fall is just through the first year. That's all. And it's like a great deal of it's memoir, but it tells a lot about, how it all got going. So it was COVID that got me into all this.
David, could I make a plug that when the new book comes out, that you join us again next year, next fall?
Oh yeah, sure. Staying up till midnight I get to sleep at midnight sometimes.
Okay.
It's not the worst. The worst is something if they want me to meet at 2 a.m. That's hard. No, 11's all right.
Any chance you'll do a North American book tour?
No,
Okay.
I don't think the publisher could afford it. I couldn't afford it, and I don't think that's happening. You have to be a big seller. Also, I just don't want to go to America. It's
Okay.
expensive. I can't afford to be there, and the flights. And I've gone to Germany twice since I've lived in Asia, since 2013. But they fly me there. Dick Baker's group used to be his group. Now it's Nicole Baden's. The Dharma Sangha. They fly me there, and it's wonderful. I love it. I encourage people go to ZBZS now, Zen Buddhist Center. Zentrum is center. Schwarzwald, the Black Forest. It's really great to practice there. They're really good people, and Nicole is really interested, and it's very relaxed. I really like it. And and it has Cresto Mountain Zen Center too, and it needs people. The German thing is pretty vibrant. So anyway,
Well, thank you.
yeah, I'd be happy to come back. This has been fun. I loved it. And wait a minute, what's your name? Ray and Nancy's daughter.
Marie. Also,
Marie. Okay, and go to cuke.com. Go to the bottom of the page. There's contact DC.
will do. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Hey, thanks a lot, everybody. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So great to have you with us. You're such a treasure.
Well, you all are too. And if I get to Washington D.C., unlikely, I will look you up.
We have guest space, David. So come on.
Oh, really? That's good. That's good.
And a great life.
I have an old friend from Fort Worth. They're very well connected too. Noam Chomsky is a very close friend of her and her husband. I'd love to spend time with him.
Hey.
But anyway,
Again, thank
okay.
you. And feel welcome, those of you that are on the Zoom, to unmute and say goodbye, please.
Oh,
Thank you, David. Thank you.
oh yeah, yeah,
Thank you so much.
yeah,
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
great memory.
yeah.
Take care.
Thank you, David. Love,
Thank you.
love
thank
your
you.
dailies or the dailies.
Hey, would you mind if I posted this as my podcast for the week?
That's be great. Everybody okay with that? Photos, yes. You have a permission.
It's not a video. It's not video. It's audio only.
Yes.
So if the FBI is looking for you or something, they won't be able to see you.
We got
Voice
it. We'll send it to you
recognition.
tomorrow.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Farewell.
Well,
So thanks a lot, all being Sangha in Ryu Pansebarger. I really enjoyed meeting with you. And that was neat hearing about Rails. And God, like I said, I had just thought of Ray. And I had talked to him a few times in Arizona in a retirement home where he and Nancy had moved. And Nancy had passed on. I knew that. But anyway, Gyate, Ray, and look forward to talking to Nancy. And thanks a lot to everybody from the All Beings Sangha right there in Washington, D.C. I hope everything goes all right in Washington, D.C. This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm D.C., Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Doggett Bandita, Feline Manis, and guest Doggett Bambita. And dear lovely Katrinka, and we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.